Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. So, why India's constitution thrives after 75 years of scrutiny? A note by Abhinav Chandrachud, a very notable advocate in Bombay High Court, son of Mr. D.Y. Chandrachud, ex-Chief Justice of India. So, on November 17, 1949, the draft constitution was taken up for its third and final reading in the Constituent Assembly of India. Over the next few days, members of the assembly harshly criticized the document. Three arguments were particularly striking: that the new constitution was far too long, that it contained nothing original, and that it was not Indian enough. Said Govindas, a congressman who had been imprisoned during the freedom movement and who would serve as an MP for nearly 5 decades between 1923 and 1970, highlighted how some felt that the constitution contained too many articles, as also many details which could well have been left out. Perhaps the most trenchant criticism came from K. Hanumanthaya, a lawyer who later became the Chief Minister of Mysore State and Union Minister of Law and Railways. Ramanthaya said that many members of the drafting committee had never been a part of the freedom movement and their draft constitutions lacked a certain Indianness. It is something like this, he said. We wanted the music of Veena or sitar, but here we have the music of an English band. Many of these criticisms were not entirely unjustified. With 395 articles and 8 schedules, the original constitution was perhaps the longest in the world. By November 1949, it had been debated over 165 days and 7,635 amendments had been suggested to it. In places, it contained seemingly banal details. Large chunks of the constitutional heavily borrowed from the Government of India Act 1935, the last constitution of colonial India. Parts of the constitution have also been inspired by constitutions across the globe. In 1946, the constitutional advisor to the Constitutional Assembly, B.N. Rao, prepared a 115-page dossier containing extracts from the constitutions of Lithuania, Hungary, Peru, Syria, South Africa, Sweden, Switzerland, Canada, and so on. It proved to be quite useful. The words equal protection of the laws in Article 14 were copied from the 14th Amendment to the US Constitution. In Article 19, Clause 2, the framers of the India's constitution decided to adopt the Irish example of setting out the exceptions to the freedom of speech and expression in the text of the constitution itself. The phrase procedure established by law in Article 21 was borrowed from Article 31 of the Japanese constitution. Perhaps the best answer to this criticism came from the two speeches delivered by B.R. Ambedkar, chairman of the drafting committee in the Constituent Assembly. In the first, in November 1948, Ambedkar addressed the argument that the constitution was unoriginal. I make no apologies, he said, because there is nothing to be ashamed of in borrowing. It involves no plagiarism. Nobody holds any patent rights in the fundamental ideas of a constitution. India's culture has never been shy of borrowed wisdom either. Roses in December 1973, the autobiography of Chief Justice M.C. Chagla of the Bombay High Court begins with a quotation from Rig Veda: let noble thoughts come to us from every side. Ambedkar agreed that the constitution contained far too many administrative details, but felt that it had been necessitated by the fact that India lacked a culture of constitutionalism, which he called constitutional morality. Ambedkar, who had taken a course called History 121 at Columbia University in the US in 1914-15, quoted a 19th century British historian called George Grote in his 12-volume History of Greece, which he had prepared without ever visiting that country. Grote wrote that constitutional morality was the indispensable condition of government at once free and peaceable. Once free and peaceable. Ambedkar explained that it was only once India had internalized a culture of constitutionalism that banal details could be left out of the constitution at the time. However, constitutional morality in India was not a natural sentiment. It had to be cultivated because democracy was only a top dressing on an Indian soil, which is essentially undemocratic. Though the constitution borrowed a phrase here and word there, it was certainly not an unthinking reproduction. In Article 21, for example, the framers avoided the American phrase due process of law because they did not want to give courts the power to strike down social welfare legislation like the US Supreme Court had done during the Great Depression. The expressions to free speech in Article 19, Clause 2, though modeled on the Irish constitution, were drawn from India's unique history and circumstances. For instance, Shyama Prasad Mukherjee's demands for the forcible reunification of India and Pakistan gave rise to the words friendly relations with the foreign states in the constitution, an exception to free speech. The provisions in India's constitution for quota-based reservation in legislative bodies, government jobs, and educational institutes are also uniquely Indian. But it was perhaps in his next speech on November 25th, 1949, that Ambedkar made the important point. However good a constitution may be, he said, it's sure to turn out bad because those who are called to work it happen to be a bad lot. Equally, he added, however bad a constitution may be, it may turn out to be a good if those who are called to work it happen to be a good lot. This speech is reminiscent of Benjamin Franklin's famous words uttered on the last day of the Philadelphia Convention at which the US Constitution was drafted. On September 17, 1787, a woman by the name of Elizabeth Willing Powell asked Franklin, well, Doctor, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy? Very thoughtful question. Franklin replied, a republic if you can keep it. And the draftsman of our Constituent Assembly gave us the Constitution. It is for us to keep it. Thank you.